Hello, and welcome to the DCIFF Film Chat Podcast. I'm Erin DeVos, and I'll be your host for this season. Join us for insightful interviews that explore the work of up-and-coming independent filmmakers from all over the world. If you're passionate about film and keen to learning about the creative process from the future cinema greats, this podcast is a must-listen for you. Our mission is to provide listeners with the engaging and informative conversations about successful and innovative films, including features, shorts, documentaries, animation, and web series from across the globe. The DCIFF Film Chat Podcast is a unique opportunity for independent filmmakers to have their voices heard in a way no other film festival can provide. You can listen to the DCIFF Film Chat Podcast on all podcast platforms or visit our website at DCIFF-indie.org/DCIFF-podcast. Thank you. Thank you so much, Brady, for joining us on the DCFF Film Chat podcast. Brady will be showcasing his film at DCFF 2025 this year. His film is called Sideways for Attention, which will be premiering on Saturday, February 15th. So welcome, Brady, to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, we're super excited to have you here too. And yeah, so as we get started here, we would love for you to share a little bit about yourself and as well as your nominated film.
Yeah. So my name is Brady Bryson. I am the writer and director of Sideways for Attention, like you said. This is my first feature film. I wrote this back in 2021, and as originally was going to be a short film that I wrote, and then eventually just kind of grew into more than 9 pages. It became 90 pages, and eventually it just it just changed so much, and it just became the thing that it is today that these have will be at the festival. So it's been a journey. It's been a fun ride so far. So my film is Sideways for Attention is about a young woman who is diagnosed with HIV on September 11th, 2001. And the film itself is about how does one move forward from personal trauma, and not only trying to move forward from that, but also trying to understand who they are, and they're trying to also reconcile with somebody in their past that they want to not only accept but also be with once again. And the film itself, is really, it's about trauma and how does one move forward from trauma. I've been having a big conversation about trauma with a lot of people recently. And, I feel like, there's certain ways you could talk about trauma, and there's certain ways that you could portray trauma on screen. One person could portray it as like somebody losing it completely and going overboard. And one person could portray it and being like, oh, this is something that is, very subtle and very quiet, and it could be very, abstract. Where with this portrayal, I wanted it to be realistic, but at the same time that this is a character that could explode at any minute. And the one thing about this film, with my goal, is to have that relatability with this character, and that everybody can experience, or has experienced, not experience, but has related to, or have been in those shoes of what Chloe's been through, and what she has overcome or is trying to overcome. So it's interesting because it's like for the past couple of years, I've been trying to write this as a short story, as a short film, and I was so surprised that I was able to make this into a feature. And like I said before, it's just, I feel like I'm living in a dream. It's a fun journey so far. And
your film's subject really does hit on, as you mentioned, like there's the, September 11th, like was very traumatic for so many people. And on top of that, like she's dealing with an HIV positive diagnosis. And so I feel there's so much, everyone can relate to, especially like in these times. And what I find, and I've seen your film, and I think it's so incredible because I think it's an important subject to highlight primarily. And in some ways, like it reminded me of, so I'm another podcast host of a podcast called Herpaderp, and it's about breaking the stigma on herpes. And so kind of relating to how your subject, like in the sense of like being diagnosed with like HIV, like going through like the emotional sensation of it all, and also like, trying to hold yourself together, but also trying to figure out how to move forward. And so I thought your film was very beautiful to be able to illustrate that, and also to be able to have these types of conversations too that not many of us are having. And, especially it can feel like, taboo at times to really talk about these certain subjects. So I want to applaud you for that. And especially since it's your first feature film, to be able to really expand on that story. It's really something that's really, very relevant to today. So want to thank you for that. And related to the question is like, or a question I wanted to ask was like related to kind of like the topic itself. Like I'd love to talk about the creation process as well, but kind of like relating to like what ultimately inspired you to want to share this story.
Yeah. So, like I said before, it was originally a short film idea that I had. I wrote this during the pandemic, being alone and isolated like everyone else during that time. I was with family, and my family and I were really talking a lot about, like, I've always been close with my family. I've always been close with them. Me and my mom are like, this reference might date me, but like me and her are like, it's like a Norman Bates relationship. We're very close to each other.
Yeah.
I just haven't put her in the fruit cellar yet, but it's a very close relationship, and we know everything about each other. We're very close, and that's everyone in my family. My dad, and my grandmother, who lives with us. I felt like we really got to know each other even more. We bonded very much during that time, and we really got to know not just what we've gone through in life, but also what she's gone through. And I got to know what she's gone through and what my grandmother's gone through and what I've gone through. And we really were talking one day and we were like, I don't think they're like, I think if you're able to talk about trauma, like, I think it just kind of came up one day. We were talking about traumatic events and how like we're able to just like hold it down and like not just like talk about them. We talked about how really like you don't realize sometimes that people are suffering with, and you don't realize it until like one event happens and it just kind of explodes. And when you realize that, you wish you could go back and kind of like understand that a little bit more. And that led to me writing this short story about this woman who ends up killing herself. And we ended up going, the idea of the short story was, it was kind of, the idea of it was supposed to be like kind of like Memento, where we just kind of go backwards and see what led her to go down this path.
Mm.
But the original short story was like there was no talking, it was just all action. Like you see her, about to kill herself. You don't know if she does it or not originally. And then the next scene would be like her stabbing her abuser. Just out of context, we just see it was basically like supposed to be like a series of images, just kind of like probably like around 5 minutes long, maybe. And then eventually, I just said to myself, this shouldn't be a short. This could go further. Like, let me see what I could like. I'm doing nothing for being stuck in here, so I might as well explore the dark themes and dark thoughts. And it just kind of grew into a story that wasn't so much about suicide, and it grew into a story about trauma, and it grew into a story about family and relationship, and what the need to wanting to be with somebody, not just in a sexual sense, but also in the sense of being loved. And I remember sharing it with my family, which is but my we're very close. So like we so like when she was reading it, my mom looked at me and she was like, she's very blunt. So she was like, the first thing she said to me was, "Okay, Brady, just so I'm gonna read your script, but like I'm gonna be honest with you. If I hate it, I'm gonna hate it." I'm like, "Yeah, it's fine. It's all good." And I remember like 3 hours later, she came up to me and she was like, "Who the fuck are you?" I said to her, my the dream is to do this, and then it just kind of snowballed from there. And it was another 2 years later until we really got things picked up. Originally, the feature film was supposed to take place during pandemic.
Mhm.
It was supposed to be her coming back from school and her getting COVID. And through COVID, she is trying to like figure out, what she's missed out on or what the same themes that are happening. But I felt I'm not a big fan of things that are on the nose. I
Yeah.
like to, reference something in the past that like, not only like that we could relate to and we could like try to learn from. I went to a film festival, the Richmond International Film Festival in 2021. I had a short film at the time there, and it was the first time in person since the 2019. And I was like, you know what, I should go. I didn't get to celebrate this film during the pandemic, in festivals. Let's go. And me and my grandmother ended up doing a road trip, and it was kind of a mistake. And we had this realization of like, oh, this is, our first time out of the house in like 2 years. I realized that I'm very close to my mom, and I was like, had a panic attack, and I was like, I really want to go home. Why did we do this? We're stuck in this hotel room where nobody's in this hotel room. And I ended up going to my show screening, and I ended up not going. I went to a couple events, but I found myself locked in my room the whole entire time.
Mhm.
And it just so happens that this festival was happening on the 20th anniversary of September 11th. And I found myself with my grandmother watching nothing but documentaries about that day, and telling her telling me about her experience on that day, and where she was, and where my mom was, and where my dad was, and where my grandfather was. But my dad's a doctor, and he was when on that day he was training. He was just speak out of the med school and was a resident. On that day, the hospital had an emergency lockdown, and they were saying they were waiting for people to come in for like emergencies, just be prepared and ready. Nobody came in because, as you know, nobody survived. Nobody survived, and it was like a hurt, it was a raw emotion that was. It was it's a it's a once in a every generation has their moment of like, where were you?
Oh, yeah.
For you probably, I mean, not to assume, but for you probably it's September 11th, right?
Right, exactly.
For
Mhm,
me, it's the pandemic. I
mhm.
knew exactly where I was when they announced that everything was shutting down.
Yeah.
And you obviously, right. I mean, everyone has that moment. And I knew right then and there, I wanted to have it be set in the past, and to explore the parallel of, this is something that everybody experiences in a generation, or, you
Mhm.
know,
Absolutely. Yeah, no, even, like, digging deeper, like, into that, like, how maybe through this film or through, like, your creative process, were you able to kind of overcome, like, your trauma in the sense of, like, what you experienced, like, that day to then be able to want to translate that, like, into the film itself? Because I feel like, with trauma, sometimes, like, it comes, like, with triggers and, with sensitivity, like, towards, like, certain subjects and yeah, similar to, like, with 9/11 and the pandemic, I know exactly, like, where I was in those moments, and sometimes, like, in the body and even the mind, like, it kinda has this, like, disconnect type of thing, just kind of, like, based on my experiences, like, with trauma, and so I'd love to kinda unpack that a little bit because I feel that's an experience or the creative process we don't really like talk about as filmmakers because like we're holding space like for others to be able to showcase this film, but we are also importantly have to take care of ourselves through the ultimate creation. So
right, right. I mean, the one thing that, that I've said, before to a couple of the friends, and, people who are on the film or came onto the film after, like when it came to like acting or, the crew, and that everybody was on. I wanted everybody to be on the same page of like, how can we do this in the most respectful way, and do it in a way that not only is going to grab people but also make people think. And, trauma. Talking about, trauma overall, or like diving deep into a character that is experiencing pain isn't an easy topic to talk. It's something that you can't prepare. I mean, there's a lot of examples on film of trauma that is, either comes off as exploiting, or comes off as, very graciously, like, well done. And the goal for this was to have, the audience go on this ride with her, and to not only experience what she's experiencing, but at the same time have that feeling of, okay, I'm learning more about her and learning about what she's gone through. And I kind of relate to that in a way. And in the creative process, a lot of research was done, not just on the not just on the time period, but also about, what is it like to be diagnosed with HIV around that time? What is it like to be, you know, for a person to be going through that? And also what trauma looked like back then. Most people didn't talk about that stuff from what I was told. Even like
Mhm.
a couple 5 years ago, dealing with trauma is not the same as it is today.
Right.
And just trying to find out in a way of how can we portray this on screen in a way that is mature, but also respectful, and tackles the questions that I want to tackle.
Yeah.
And that comes with not just acting, but also that comes with a producer and a good crew that understands the source material, but also helps me as a director think outside the box and challenge me to not just go forward with pushing the story forward, but also doing it in a way that I don't want to say hasn't been done before. And I think that might be too cliche to say, but that has been looked at, outside the box, I guess.
Yeah.
I hope that answers your question.
No, that does. Yeah, because it helps us, understand, yeah, self, like in the sense of kind of like where you're at, like with the direction of like the film, but importantly, like having, your producers and cast and crew like being like sensitive to like, well, I say sensitive, but like, being mindful of
Yeah,
like what the story you're trying to share with everybody. So, yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. And that makes me think of we highlighted some or we're in a way like we're kind of highlighting some of like the challenges and like the, successes that can kind of like come with it too. Like what would you say was your most like challenging part of producing this film? Like was it yeah, I'll let you speak to that. Yeah.
There's a lot of challenges.
Yeah.
There's a lot of challenges with this. Even not even just when filming it, just getting it made was a challenge.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
went through 3 producers.
Mhm.
We had a, I was in an interview with somebody once who read the script. It was my first interview, and they read the script and they said to me, "If I had all the money in the world and all the time in the world, I would dedicate my life to making sure that this will never."
Mm.
And I was like, "Oh, you see, I struck a nerve there."
Yeah.
And we talked about it, and they said, "You're too young to experience this. You should stay in your own lane. You should not, do this film." That's a polite way of saying it. It wasn't polite way that it happened, but
Yeah.
I figured, okay, it was a good lesson though, because I know now, okay, this is the position I'm in. I'm young, writing something that happened, taking place 20 years ago, and you're going to get some people that aren't going to like that, appreciate it. I mean, films are subjective. You're going to get people who are going to either get it or not get it.
Right.
So that's a good example, and also in a professional sense, it's a good understanding of what that is going to be, I guess.
Mhm.
Couple other producer meetings later, people saw as oh, this is a college film. It should be more about college kids, and their trauma together. Or like, oh, this should, if you have it in a university setting, you need it to be about, everybody's trauma, not just her trauma. And there's a lot of disconnect. And eventually, the one producer I met, Nick Baldili, was a recommendation through an acting friend that I've worked with for years. And I remember sending him the script. He read the script. Like I sent to him probably in the afternoon. And by the evening, he said in the email, he said to me, "Just so you know, a little bit about me. I just quit smoking 2 months ago. Your script made me want to smoke like 7 cigarettes." I was, I was like, okay. He got sick burnings, and then eventually we just got the ball rolling. And a lot of it was, filmmaking is problem solving.
Yeah.
As they say, I was told that once by a crew member, and I've learned that the hard way. And a lot of times, there was moments where in post production or in pre production, we were trying to figure out budgets. We had a small budget that unfortunately grew into a bigger budget, but also we had times where not a funny story is I just graduated college when I was making this film. I applied for graduate school and I didn't get in, and then I got a last minute email saying that I got in. So it was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. But at the same time, like, how am I going to pay for this? How's this going to happen? So production was delayed, and we were trying to balance what we're going to like. We were trying to balance how we're going to film this, how are we going to plan these dates accordingly. When it came time to being on set, you know, we had a lot of fun things happen on set. We lost locations. We were delayed. We only had 2 hours at this location. We had to make do with what we had. We had, you know, we had actors get sick. We had people, lose cost wardrobes. It was a lot. But I like to say it's character building.
Mhm.
It's a good, still. But I remember in the last day we were filming the clinic scene where they're waiting, where she's waiting in the room with all the other patients, and she gets called in. Once we said, once I said cut, I remember I looked at my cinematographer and looked at my actress and the actors, and that's it. And there's just this huge sigh of like relief of like, oh my goodness, we did this. Like I never would have thought in my wildest dreams that this would have happened. And here it happened. Like, wow. And it's a feeling like no other. It's a feeling that I want to relive over and over again. So, but also, it was a good moment. And then like post production was hell.
Oh, yeah, true. I mean,
It was
post-production.
really fun. I had the editor live with me for like a month in my mom's basement. So we were just all like crammed in my infamous basement. We were like editing like 24 hours straight. So it was fun. It was a fun time.
Yeah, no, I love how you talked about the process of it all, like in the sense of, whether it's like locations, like, and, different people that you're working with, like, with the multiple producers and, eventually finding one that really speaks to your vision and like understood the assignment, if you will. And so it's just very compelling, like, to see, like, all the different types of elements that, like, go into filmmaking. Like, we do see, ultimately, like, the film, but at the same
Mhm.
time, like, all the work that goes into it, all the, comments and feedback that goes into it, like, along the way too, and for you to always, like, just stick, like, with your vision and knowing that, like, someone's gonna get this and someone's going to, see, like, what I see in this film, and that's what's important too, and one thing that I really love about DCIFF as well is, like, that collaborative effort, like, everyone, like, kind of comes together, like, to attend a film festival to ultimately share with the world like what you had produced, but also coming together to formulate new projects and such too. So I love how you illustrated that very beautifully, like your experience into starting out with this film. And, it's only going to be more too. And there was a
Yeah,
comment that,
totally.
yeah.
Potentially.
Oh, yes.
But
No, I'm rooting for you. But yeah, you also brought up a point as well, like, about how, like, young you are as a filmmaker, and here I am coming off pressure from the high school film festival that we put on YCAM for DCIFF, and there's so the filmmate like, no matter, like, what age you are, I feel that everyone has the space to create, and I don't know, I just really felt for you in that comment when that producer was just like, "You're too young to experience this." Well, there's so many things that people don't know that, that they've experienced or like, really learning the stories of like what you bring to the forefront and also like, the story that you're trying to tell. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that the fact of I hope that, anyone listening to this or, you or anyone else is just like doesn't like, who can break out of that too, like, in the sense of, like, that's just I feel like it's so stigmatized, like, for someone to call you, like, young in that sense, but it's just kinda
and
like, no, like, it's the experience that makes it drive, like, that much
right.
better, and, even just seeing the high school films that I saw, like, I wouldn't have predicted, like, a high school filmmaker had created that or, like, the story that came of it because it's very mature, and I feel filmmaking really presents that in itself, and as we start out, like, we're testing, like,
Right.
finding, like, the different, like, genres or different styles that we like to create, but ultimately, like, that's what we want to do is to create and showcase to the world, so had to
Yeah, I
say
mean,
that.
you
Yeah.
know, I was told once that like your films are your business cards. They represent who you are.
Mm,
And sometimes that could change as you grow older later on. But I've been told a lot on the festival circuit with this film. It's a good first film to go and get it out of your system and to go and you want to tackle something that is out of your comfort zone. You want to go and like explore that. And it's a good way to explore, but also like to understand, like, okay, this is what I've learned from this process and from this. Take what you've learned from there and you put it to the next one.
mhm.
And yeah, and the great thing about it is, it's when you have moments that are out of your control and like that happen to you, they make you see things in a different world. For some people, it could be upsetting and heartbreaking to hear stuff like that. Producer said, or like what other people, what happens on set. But for me, it was just like I said before, character building, but also at the same time though, it's a moment of like, okay, filmmaking is problem solving. How can you, figure this out? Fun ride.
Truly. Yeah, I mean, even I'm just starting to build out, like, my script in the sense of, like, but after with being with DCIFF over these past few years, like,
Yeah.
you and all the filmmakers have inspired me to just, just do it, ultimately.
Can I ask you, is it a short or a feature script?
I'm thinking about creating it as a short, but then
Okay.
maybe making it into a web series.
Oh,
So,
nice.
yeah, so it's kind of like playing around that. Similar to I say it's similar to yours in the sense that, like well, I'll share a little bit about it, everybody. Is like the
Yeah,
script
definitely.
yeah, so what I have, like, the idea is, like, it's in the pandemic world, and it's kind of, like, essentially, like, about, like, my life in the sense of, like, working remotely, like, always being in front of the computer, always being, like, on in the sense of work, but then on the other side of the screen, it's just like, it's a girl who's like living on her own, like trying to like build and find that sense of community and that sense of belonging in a remote type of environment. And so through that, it helped me kind of like understand not only like just myself, but also like what other people were experiencing at that time. Cause like remote life is not you know, it's normalized now, but I feel like many people, or I'd say like many people, meaning like some films or like some, series that I've seen, like don't really like kind of articulate that in the sense like, it's just kind of people out and about, but you don't really see someone who's truly by themselves, like kind of going through, building that sense of self. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's along the lines of what it is.
that's amazing. That's really awesome.
Thank you. Yeah. So I'm figuring that out. Like, it's very like in minimal stages, but looking forward to, chatting with you more about it or like with other filmmakers who are interested in terms of like what type of creative ways to really convey that story. So yeah.
Hell yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, all the best in the world for that. That's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, so definitely I might have to collaborate with you definitely at some
Yeah,
point.
hey, you never know.
True. Absolutely.
That's the beauty about these festivals. Like I've met so many amazing, writers and directors and producers on this run. I never would have thought that in my life. You know, we need more festivals like this where it's just for film. We need that. That so being a part of this festival this year and meeting people like you and other filmmakers, it's really privileged and honored to be part of it. So it's a lot.
Yeah, no, same here. Likewise, like it's such an honor to be able, to be in everyone's presence and to be able, for you guys to be, I say brave, but like in ways like brave to showcase what this is and
Yeah.
what it's all about and, what society is today. So we need more of that. And yeah, that's what I like about DCIFF is like the forum part of our name is like we want to build on these conversations more than like what we're doing like in the podcast, but like the panels that they're at the end of the discussions and also like the seminars that we have too. So it only helps us like bring and collaborate more. So yeah,
Awesome. I mean, hey, that's the best way to spread the word and best way to promote and understand other filmmakers. So like it's really amazing.
truly. Yeah, and that reminds me of one question that one question that I asked the filmmaker, well, I'll ask you as well, but like one of the questions that really struck me was just like he, pointed to me just kind of be like, well, why do you attend film festivals? Like, why is it important that you are here? And then that really struck me in the sense of, like, trying to ask that not only to other filmmakers, but also, like, whether it's, like, staff or, like, volunteers, like, why are we ultimately here? And that's what's also special about DCFF happening, like, for President's Day weekend and Valentine's Day too, is just, like, showcasing, like, our love of indie film. So we're building an event on that, so we'll be sharing that on social and such like that. But, yeah, that kinda just reminded me of, like, really having that sense of community building, character
Right.
building, within our forum, so
Yeah, my film is a real Valentine's Day film, so it's
well, yeah, we're showcasing your I think the day after
day
Valentine's Day,
after.
yeah.
Yeah, it's for the best, probably.
Yeah, no, we did not cure we did not curate it to be that way, but all good, yeah, so, no, this has been really insightful and engaging conversation. Is there anything that I didn't ask or something that we had talked about that you wanted to share on the podcast?
No, I mean, I think we covered everything. This is really, for me, it's just going the flow with everything. This has been a really great conversation to have with you. So this is great. I
Awesome.
think this opportunity and this platform. So thank you.
Absolutely, of course. Yeah, no, I'm so glad that we had the chance to chat and yeah, to be able to learn more about you as well. So thank
Awesome.
you, Brady, so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much, Aaron. Thank you.
This podcast is brought to you by the DCIFF supporters. We could not be here without all of you to be sharing this amazing outlet with filmmakers from around the world. If you are interested in supporting DCIFF, head on over to our website through the link description in the bio of this episode, or you can go right to the website, which is DCIFF-INDIE.org, to connect with us and learn more about our Future of Film programs, our festival, and also more educational opportunities in what we do with our high school students, community, and beyond. We look forward to your support.